Throughout the 19th century, there were instances where Latter-day Saints endured horrific persecution. There were times when Latter-day Saints fell into conflict with the neighbors around them, and there were times when Latter-day Saints themselves became the persecutors. The first violent protest against the church happened in March of 1832 at the John Johnson farmhouse in Hiram, Ohio. Joseph Smith was staying there with his young family, including two adopted infant twins, when a mob burst in and dragged Joseph Smith out into the night. Joseph Smith was badly beaten by the mob. He was tarred and feathered and almost had a vial of acid forced into his mouth. He looked over during the attack and saw Sidney Rigdon lying prone on the ground and thought that Sidney Rigdon had been killed by the mob. In fact, Sidney Rigdon was delirious for a few days after this attack. The following day, Joseph Smith was scheduled to preach a sermon, and while he was preaching, he noticed that several people from the mob that attacked him had attended. He still preached the sermon and baptized a few people because he was acting in response to the Savior's teaching that you don't persecute others and that you bear your punishment with meekness. Now, in the Doctrine and Covenants, the Savior also gave several teachings to the Latter-day Saints, asking them to not engage in violence, to bear calmly and meekly the persecutions that they faced. In places like Jackson County, Missouri, and later Northwest Missouri, the saints were persecuted. In Jackson County, the saints were evicted from their homes and forced to relocate as refugees to northern Missouri. In northern Missouri, some of the saints decided to fight back. This is where some of those rumors about Latter-day Saint Danites come from, because the Danites were an organization that for 5 months in the summer and fall of 1838 tried to fight back against the people that were persecuting the saints. Unfortunately, this backward and forth, this conflict where the saints fought and were fought against, eventually escalated until an extermination order was issued, and a massacre happened at Haun's Mill, Missouri, where 18 Latter-day Saint men were killed. Now the saints regrouped. They went to Nauvoo, where they also endured violent persecution. Joseph Smith was killed by a mob. The saints were forced to leave Nauvoo and relocate to the west. And when they got to the west, this is when one of the darkest episodes in the history of the church happened. The Latter-day Saints became very paranoid because the United States had sent an army to remove Brigham Young as governor of Utah. In the midst of this hysteria, a wagon train traveled into Utah called the Fancher Party. And the Fancher Party, along the way, caused conflict with all the settlements they entered into until they made it to Cedar City, Utah. When they got to Cedar City, Utah, there was a fight that broke out between them and the Latter-day Saints there, and they relocated to rest to a place called Mountain Meadows. In the days that followed, the local leaders of the church in Cedar City and the surrounding areas decided to attack the settlers. They did so with the assistance of some local Native American tribes, and the attack, which went wrong from the beginning, eventually escalated until an entire militia unit of Latter-day Saints was called out and carried out a horrible act, the Mountain Meadows Massacre. It's important that we understand the times in our history when we've been the persecuted, when we've engaged in conflict, and this one instance where we have been the persecutees. Every one of these has a rich context that it's important for you to understand, and it's also important to understand what the Lord has taught about persecution and how the Latter-day Saints should respond to it. If you want to do a deep dive into some of these events and help understand 19th century peace and violence among Latter-day Saints, you can join me at gospelscholars.com, where we'll spend a lot of time discussing each one of these conflicts, what the root and the context of the conflict was, and how we can avoid these type of conflicts in our own lives.